I, female, was in my early 20s, hitchhiking the west coast of the United States. I had been dropped off in the outskirts of Los Angeles. Exploring the area, I discovered a discreet and overgrown section of cemented canal. I set up my tent there and had an uneventful night. In the morning, I left the tent with a few heavier, replaceable items and went into the city proper to dusk. When I returned to camp, my heart sank when I noticed my tent was on the other side of the trickling stream in the canal. I thought someone had vandalized or stolen some of my things. I opened the tent to find everything as I had left it, exactly as I had left it. I started to gaslight myself. You were tired last night and excited this morning. You came in off a different street. Still, I felt uneasy. It was too late to find a different spot, so I resigned myself to moving my tent back across the stream. I curled up with my dog in my lap and my knife at my side in case whoever moved my tent came back. Unable to fall asleep, I read by the light of a street lamp. The book distracted me from the day's events, yet sleep did not come. Hours passed. How many? I cannot say. Eventually, the soft hum of hungry mosquitoes was cut with the rhythmic click-clack of claws on cement. A sense of dread washed over me. I grabbed my knife in one hand and pulled my dog in closer to keep her calm and quiet. My blood froze as the footsteps drew closer. I listened. It only sounded like the one critter, no human accompanying it. Trying to calm down, I thought, no need to worry, no need to bother it. It will pass. Until the steps stopped directly across the stream. It paused, then began sniffing and scratching at the ground. Curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly shifted myself to peek through the netting at the top of the tent. I saw a ghastly creature lurking right where my tent had been. This thing was black and patterned with dust. It was barrel-chested and hunched back, with feet that looked too large for it. The creature had a mane of fur from the face down, the back to when a tail should have been, and the rest of its skin was pulled tight against bone. It couldn't have been more than 30 pounds, half the size of my dog, yet I was terrified of it. My gut told me I did not want this thing to see me, so I scrunched myself back down. I gripped my dog and knife tightly as I listened. It paced back and forth, stopping to scratch or sniff. Its demeanor grew more frantic. Its pace quickened. It began growling and snapping its jaws in the air. I waited silently, knife poised, for what felt like forever. Suddenly, it stopped. It turned and casually headed back down the canal the same way it had come. I could not sleep the rest of the night. I sat there, gripping my dog and knife until the sun rose. At the first sign of day, I packed everything up. Before I left, curiosity got the better of me again. I crossed the stream and looked where the creature had been. The ground was littered with scratch marks. I took a deep breath and left. I had never been back to Los Angeles since then. Never before or since have I been scared of an animal like that. I can't be certain what happened that dim human night. All I know is I will carry that feeling for the rest of my life. That feeling of being prey to something unnatural, something sharp, hungry, and skittering. Chupacabra. I, 18 female, had a terrifying and traumatic experience when I was only 12 years old. It was nighttime, maybe around 9 p.m., and I was completely home alone. My family had been at a county carnival for a couple hours and wouldn't be back until later. I don't remember why I decided to stay behind, but I did. The house was eerily quiet, and most lights were off, except for the hallway light where I was sitting. For better understanding, my bedroom was adjacent to the laundry room, and my older sister's room was directly across mine. There was about a 2-foot wide wall separating the door to my room and the door to the laundry room. I was sitting with my back on that wall while on the floor. I was playing some kind of game on my little iPod when all of a sudden I heard an explosive bang on the wall in my sister's room. I quickly jumped up and ran into my room. I stood there silently and stared into her room, trying to understand what happened. I realized that nothing had fell and nobody was in there. My heart started racing and continued to stand there with my eyes wide open. That's when I heard the second loud bang in the same spot. It sounded like it was coming from inside of the walls. I jumped into my bed and threw my covers over me. I immediately called my mom to come home as soon as she could. I sat there for what felt like forever, just waiting to hear that horrific noise again. My family came home about 30 minutes later, and I was still in my bed, hiding. My family looked around everywhere and saw no sign of damage, a fallen object, or a break-in. I was confused, but not surprised. Stuff like this was pretty common in this house, but never got less terrifying. A few days later, my aunt visited our house to check it out. She is an extremely spiritual person and does energy work, spiritual therapy, and healing for a living. She stood in my sister's room for a while and told us that there were 1 or 2 evil entities in our walls, possibly trying to get out. I believe this because I never told anyone that I heard it come from inside of the walls. I'm 39 male, living in Michigan. This is the story of the first time I had sleep paralysis. I had dated someone in the past who dealt with sleep paralysis and night terrors, so I was aware of what it entailed. But until experiencing it for yourself, you can never really understand the dread that overtakes you. It was like a lucid dream. In fact, for a long time afterwards, I debated if it was a real event or not. It was the middle of the night. I had been asleep, but now was laying, kinda propped up in bed, on an angle, with pillows behind my back. I am a grown man, but still sleep with a nightlight. I had a Himalayan salt rock lamp on my nightstand, putting off a warm orange glow. As my senses came about, I realized that even though I was sitting up a bit, I had zero motor function of my body. I was paralyzed from head to toe. This alone was a terrifying notion. As someone who had been blessed with relatively good health through the years, not being able to move was shocking to say the least. Upon realizing this, I began to take stock of my surroundings, and as I scanned the room, I saw him. My bedroom is part of an addition to my house. Therefore, it is a rather oblong shape. My bed was pushed into the corner on one side of the room. On the other side, out of the reach from the glowing nightlight, stood a shadow man. I would describe him the same as many others have described shadow people. He was nothing more than a silhouette, but was more black than all the darkness surrounding him. He stood tall, with no features at all, but somehow I could feel his non-existent eyes fixated on me. He never moved, just stood there, staring at me vacantly. Instant terror washed over me. I could sense his malice and hostility. It felt like he wanted to hurt me. My body went into fight or flight mode, and my adrenaline surged. But there was no moving. I remember trying to will my arms to function, but it was as if there were 10,000 pounds. I could not budge. My consciousness was my only tool. I wanted to scream at the entity. I kept trying to yell, "This is a house of God. You are not welcome here." But it was as if my voice was caught in my throat. Trying to urge the words from my mouth was met with defeat over and over again. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Like a spell had been lifted, I gasped in a huge breath. My body seemed to tense and hug the bed's mattress. I could move again. I sat all the way up, and my head darted around, frantically looking for the shadow figure. It was gone, but it hadn't disappeared. It didn't dissolve into thin air. It was merely there 1 second, and not there the next. My heart was beating rapidly, and I took in very deep breaths. I laid back in bed and tried to calm myself. That was a terrifying dream, I thought. But then again, was it? It didn't feel like I had been dreaming. My dreams are usually pretty bizarre. They're never in a typical setting from my life, like a bedroom. And it didn't feel like I woke up from sleep. You know how you typically have that feeling, coming from dreamland to the waking world, that sense of clarity that you're now back in reality? I didn't have that at all. I didn't wake up and open my eyes. It was just as if the event had finished, and now I was laying in bed alone. It was the oddest feeling and stuck with me for weeks after. Eventually, I decided it was not a dream at all, It just felt too real, and I had to wonder if the warm glow from my salt rock lamp was the only thing that night that kept the shadows at bay.